Welcome to Two Woke Bonnets, a podcast where we revisit the classic TV shows of our Gen X childhoods and see how well they hold up today. With your hosts, Carol and Joey.
Welcome back to the Prairie. This is Carol.
And I'm Joey.
Because I don't think we introduced ourselves last episode.
No, we did not. We're Two Woke Bonnets.
Yes.
Where we have been rewatching Little House on the Prairie and talking about whether or not the episodes hold up under the light of 2024. And just reliving our beloved childhood. So please know anything we say from a place of love. So and
well, now we are now on one of my favorite episodes, which is Plague. I like the episodes where there's a body count. What does it say about
you, Carol, that this is your favorite episode? Okay, so this is according to IMDb, this is season 1, episode 18. If you are watching it on Peacock, this is season 1, episode 19, because they count the original pilot movie that they made as part of season 1. So just know that the numbers are going to be one off. But this is actually episode 18 in the actual season count. Okay. So I feel like we're going to have to make that disclaimer from now on. So
yeah. So we start with a poor farmer played by, I want to say, Matt Clark. Is that his name?
Matt Clark, who is one of those people who is just
you know his face.
You know his face. He is a character actor. Up to this point, you would have seen him in a lot of one-offs. He was in Rat Patrol, which I think is funny because of the episode. He was in Bonanza, so he is one of those people that would have been in Michael Landon's sphere of knowledge prior to. For more modern people, he was in Grace Under Fire. He was also in the Jeff Foxworthy show. He played Emmett, which was her former father-in-law in Grace Under Fire. And then he played one of the mechanics in Jeff Foxworthy's show. So,
for you hardcore nerds, he was also in Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. He's very much a character actor, and you recognize his face, if not his name. Anyway, he's buying cornmeal from Peterson. So here is my first question. Is this supposed to be the same Peterson as episode 1? Or was that guy's name Peters?
No, he was Irish. Remember? It was the racist episode. This is not the same one. This is the one and only time this Peterson's in there. He has very few lines.
He's definitely not Irish, and it's definitely not the same actor. So did Lars actually disappear the first Peterson and then get a second Peterson to run the feed seed? But anyway,
no, he doesn't know where this guy came from. This guy which is weird because Hans has to rent everybody the places, it seems like.
Yeah. And this is Peterson's feed and seed, and he's Peterson, so I'm assuming he's working at it. He's in the office later on, so
yeah,
I'm assuming he's running the feed and seed. But anyway, he has cornmeal at a cut rate price,
right?
And our
this is one of those things that just confuses me in Walnut Grove. It's like the fact that how
anybody is competing.
When you go back to that, how is there a Home Depot and a Lowe's both in this little tiny town?
Yeah,
but go ahead.
Are they selling wheat flour and cornmeal?
Yes.
Because Lars is complaining because nobody's buying wheat or flour, or because they're all buying cornmeal.
They're not buying as much, because they're buying cornmeal because they can buy 2 bags for the same price of 1 bag of flour.
Right. Because he's got it priced so cheap. And this farmer buys 4 bags, and he's counting his blessings and thank you. The Lord sent you to us, and you didn't have to price it this low, and every poor farmer, yada yada. So we cut back to the shed where the cornmeal's being stored, and you see rats.
You see a rat.
A rat.
A rat. 1. So you're like, maybe Peterson doesn't know?
Doesn't know?
This is not good.
But how can he not know?
Well, because later on, yeah.
But that, as the show will show, they never know what to do with a villain. So I
Yeah.
have always been under the assumption that this dude knows there's rats in his shed, and that's why he's selling the cornmeal at such a discounted rate.
Which is a brand new building. I mean, everything else
It's a
is
brand new shed.
withered within an inch of its life. Everything else is the color of my couch.
And that's the other thing. He's not storing this with the other stuff. It has its own separate place
That's locked.
that's locked. So
Yeah.
how can he not know?
But
But
he brings
whatever.
it
He's
home.
selling, yeah.
Eric brings it home to his family. His wife, Sylvie, makes up bread, and his son is thrilled to death because he
Two,
gets to have as much bread as he would like. 2 loaves
two
versus just
loaves
one.
for one meal.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we can have this whenever they want. And they like cut back to the flour, and you're already seeing fleas on the flour bag.
Right.
So
The cornmeal bag.
the cornmeal bag, yeah.
So
So
there's already something
um,
amiss in the in there.
right.
So,
And of course, Charles does not buy the cornmeal because he's being loyal to Lars.
well, it's his own flour. It's his own
Yeah,
wheat
he's
flour.
trying to sell his
He
own
doesn't
flour
have
at
to.
Lars's. So
Yeah, he doesn't have to buy flour. Which
yeah,
actually, I had a duh moment about this. Okay, we'll talk about that a little later. But I had a brain fart for a minute. But it took me a while to realize that he's not going to sell all his flour to Hanson.
yeah,
He kept his own bought back, so he was never in danger because he was a wheat farmer. So
yeah,
therefore, he would only have wheat. The only reason why he would be in danger would be if he went to somebody else's house and ate from them. So,
right.
okay.
So but Edwards, who we see this episode, is going to go over there and get some cornmeal because he wants to make, it's a good price and he can't say no to it.
Yeah.
So,
And
so
and Charles gives him permission
I
as
don't
if
know
it
why
was
he
up to
needs permission,
Charles, but whatever.
whatever. But the next day, or several days later, I should say, because Sylvie says he's had a fever for 3 or 4 days. Somebody calls Doc Baker because Eric's son is very sick, and he goes to their farm, and he's running an extremely high temperature. Doc Baker doesn't say how high his temperature is, but he's obviously concerned when he looks at the thermometer.
Yeah,
So,
and he starts packing him an ice even
yeah,
there.
yeah.
So,
So he tells Eric to go get ice, and he tells Sylvie, get me some rags. I'm going to put some alcohol, try and cool him down a little bit. And then Sylvie passes out because she is also sick.
yes.
Um,
And
so
she's sick more because she's
yes,
actually making the bread. So it's all over her hands.
it's all over her.
And
Yeah.
she's not just ingesting it. So,
Yeah. And this is like any other disease. Some people will catch it, some people won't.
right.
Um, Eric does not catch it. So, but she's very sick. Their boy is very sick. Uh, Baker goes to the church on Sunday and tells everyone that, oh, this is actually, he's treating them, and then Sylvie dies.
Yeah.
And it's just, the scene is just like, and this is probably very historically accurate. He just looks at Eric and goes, I'll be with the boy, and just leaves her.
Yeah. Because
Because
well,
she's
and
dead.
it would make sense because
Yeah,
she's
because
the homemaker. She's been
mhm,
probably far more exposed. She's continued to eat the bread
yeah,
because she's healthier, but she's probably running herself ragged now, trying to take care of the
trying
boy,
to care of
trying
both.
to take care
Yeah,
of the house, trying to take care of Eric, and all those things because that's just was a woman's place back then. So,
yeah. So she got very, she was probably sicker than the boy anyway, but she passes away, and he goes to the church and says, okay, Sylvie died this morning and their son is very sick, and I think it is typhus. And of course
so
everyone's like,
yes.
oh no, no, oh dear God, no.
And they
And
say shelter in place. Yeah.
yeah, shelter in place. Don't go out. Um, stick to your farms until we figure out where it's coming from.
Okay.
So
I do want to talk a little bit about this. What is the song that they're singing in church right before he walks in?
Bringing in the sheaves, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Should have bought that wheat flour from Lowe's.
Dun, dun, dun. Little foreshadowing.
You little trying to save a buck. Trying to save a
We will
buck.
come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves. He's dead. So anyway, sorry.
So, so, so they have to stay home, and the girls are trying to homeschool, and Charles goes out hunting, and
Yes.
he comes across
No,
an
Carol goes out, tells him something. We need to talk about this. Because
Oh,
here's your 1970s woke moment, right?
yes, here's your
So this is for your
1970s woke
bingo
moment.
card. So she walks outside and she says, I didn't want to say anything in front of Carrie, but I was reading a book about the happy little bunny to Carrie, and she says she loves rabbits so much and she doesn't want to eat them anymore. So if you can't find anything but rabbits, hide that. Don't bring them in the house. We'll just cook it up and not tell her what it is. So
Maybe this is why you never see Mary's little rat or a rabbit pelt tape anymore from Christmas, because Carrie destroyed it. But we barely see Carrie. We didn't see her at all last episode, and we
yeah, she did
barely see
not
her
speak
here.
in
She does
either
not speak.
episode. You don't
Yeah.
get to check her off on your card for this one. Which
So,
yeah.
yeah. So he goes out hunting, and he comes across an older couple who had
Yeah,
been in
this
church.
cart that looks like nobody's driving
Yeah.
it. And
Carl and
it's
his wife, and
yeah.
they're very sick. So he brings them to Doc Baker, thereby exposing himself to this, because he's carrying them in and he's helping them in. So he's exposed.
Yeah,
And
because
then
Doc Baker comes by later, yells out to Caroline, and she says, We're
yeah,
fine. Mike, Pa went
Charles is out hunting.
Michael
Yeah.
Landon went out hunting. Charles went out hunting. Yeah. So, and then he comes back and he sees Charles's cart, the cart there, and Charles's horse. And he goes inside and finds them. And then he sees the rash, and the rash is
Yeah.
evidently the confirmation that
Yeah.
it is
He's like,
indeed
this is
typhus.
typhus. You've been exposed. You can't go home. You're gonna have to tell Carolyn that.
Yeah.
And then try and find Reverend Alden, because we're going to use the church as a sick place.
Yeah, it's called the
And talk to,
church, not the schoolhouse, even
yeah,
though it's both.
even
So
though it's both.
because
And then talk to Nels and get some sheets and stuff. So Charles
and I
springs
thought it
into
was nice the
action.
way they did this, like
Yes. Yeah,
they,
he's exposed,
he
but
calls out.
he's yelling up to Nels, don't come down. Just go put them near the church. I don't want to go inside your place.
Yeah, because nobody's been to the church at this point other than Doc Baker walking in on church that Sunday. But
Yeah.
Nels can bring
But
the
at that
sheets and the
point,
blankets over without bringing in patients who are actually
yeah,
infected with it. So
yeah.
if they can get everything ahead of time. My husband, Matt, loves to sit and watch the episodes while I'm watching them. He never actually sits down when I starts them. He walks in halfway. And one of the things he talks about is, they are like, bring as much ice into the church as you have. And he's like, how are they making ice? I'm like, they're not making it. They're salting it. It gets brought to them. But
Yeah.
like, but
And
still.
they will they'll go to ponds in the winter and pull ice and put
And
it
then
and store it
salt
in
it.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a part of me that was like, if they need these people to be as cold as possible, why aren't they bringing
Bring
them
them
into
down in there.
the car?
But then you'd
But
have
then
to
that would
fumigate the
infect.
hat.
Yeah, that would
Yeah.
infect everything. So,
So
but anyway,
so
yes.
they move everybody into the church, and he tells Charles to go around to farms to see if there's
People are
anybody
sick.
else.
Yeah. And that makes sense. You want to centralize it that way. Doc is not trying to travel back and forth. He can just focus on the people. But all the time they're doing this, they're not doing any investigative work. They're
No,
not saying, have you recently changed your
your
hairspray,
diet,
your
or
diet, your whatever?
what
What have you been
what have you
eating? Where have
purchased
you been
recently
going?
that you haven't purchased previously? They know
Yeah.
where typhus comes from. It comes from the fleas on rats.
Yeah.
So it's basically like it's the diseases from rats, not necessarily from fleas, because Laura's like, but Jack has fleas.
Yeah.
They're
It's not.
not on a
Yeah.
rat. So
Yeah. But they don't talk about that, and you
Right.
would think that they would know enough about typhus to be able to say, okay, let's start with the supply. Have you seen
Yeah.
any? But they don't. It
But
does
they
take them a
don't.
long time.
It does take them, and they're walking by that bag of cornmeal in Eric's place that does have fleas on it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh my God, just look.
But yeah, so there's a very tough
And
touching.
every person that's like, well, because Charles goes around, he goes and tells Carolyn, I've been, exposed. It's typhus, and oh my God, no. And it's like,
Well,
well,
he tells
God, you
Mary not
gotta
to
say
come any
something.
closer, and then he tells her to go
Yeah,
get her mother, and the mother doesn't try to walk closer. He never has to tell her to stop.
yeah.
So it's like
So
Laura
she,
didn't have enough time to say, Dad wants to see you, but don't walk up to him. So
okay, well,
it was
but
interesting.
he,
It was one of those weird thoughts in the back of my head as I was watching it. So anyway,
yeah. And he
um,
went there, and then he goes to visit Edwards because he's like, I just want my best friend, you know,
watch
to
after my
watch
family.
out for my kids. Oh, so you want me to marry Carolyn, huh? But here is where it starts to get a bit ridiculous because how many times does Edward say corn dodgers?
Yeah. And
It's
he's
just-
like, I bet they'd sit like a lead balloon, probably kill me the way you cook them.
those
Yeah, it
those
would.
corn dodgers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
And then he goes back to Eric's house.
yeah, and at that point, his son has died. And we get one of the more just like mean spirit. This the last episode and this episode are kind of mean spirited. I like the mean spiritedness of this episode more though, but
But how
yeah,
tragic.
he's
And
just like sitting there with his dead son, saying, my
under
boy
the
won't come into
tree.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too nice a day. I couldn't wake this pumpkin up. And it's obvious he knows, but he
They
doesn't
could
want to
be a
accept.
lot more gory. It could have been a lot more graphic. You see that the boy is very pale, but he's not
Yeah,
blue and purple and mottled like he could have
yeah.
been. Um,
So it's done tastefully. I will say this isn't the last time that tainted goods are sold to farmers in Walnut Grove.
it's not the last time that it's sold to Matt Clark.
Yes.
Matt Clark has one
Keep that in mind.
destiny here
Keep that in
in
mind.
Walnut Grove. When he comes back,
So
foreshadowing.
so
He is not a good purveyor of goods. He does not shop well. Let me just
his wives
say
need to
that.
start shopping for him.
Well, she died. Not only did she die, but this poor actress, that was actually the very last episode of anything she's appeared in. When I looked her up
Oh,
on IMDb, she only had about 10 credits and she was like,
so maybe it was one of those things where it's just I don't like it. So
yeah. So well, and she didn't have a ton of speaking parts. It was kind of like that doctor's assistant.
handing him a scalpel type thing.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, saying, well, and announcing that the person was dead for Charles and Caroline with their son. Yeah,
Yeah.
same thing. But anyway, so Helen Clark, this was her last episode. She played Sylvie Bolton. Little Peter Bolton was, sorry, it's all together. Paul Bolton was Bradley Green. It was actually his last episode too, but he was in General Hospital for a long time.
Okay.
So it is possible that he appeared in things after that, but it's his most recent credit was this. So I don't know what happened between Paul and Sylvie, but they never appeared
they just
again.
left acting. They're just like, I hated that little kid so much.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So
But yeah.
so he's up on the hill. And the one thing that I thought was really poignant, and maybe this is me just being a mushball, but when Matt Clark is there holding his son, Charles goes to say, like, let me check on him. Is he really dead? Or we need to get you checked on. And he is fully aware.
He's aware.
He's fully aware that his son has passed. But he's already just lost his wife. And now he's dealing with the death of his son. Because they were trying to just bring all the typhus people together.
Yeah.
And when Charles tries to confront him, he's like, don't. Just don't.
Just don't.
And Charles at least is wise enough. At least I'm so glad it wasn't Mary, because Mary wouldn't have been smart enough. But Charles is at least, he acknowledges, okay, this man needs to grieve. Because when you go into the bedrooms, you see that the mattresses are gone.
Yeah.
It's like stripped down. He's burned things. He's done what he's needed
aware
to do.
of what he has to
He's
do
aware.
to take care of the disease. And it's
He
obvious
just
he's
needs
not sick.
right. And
Yeah.
he's immune to it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So he just needs to process in his own. And sometimes that's what you have to do. Just like Doc Baker had to leave behind Sylvie and focus on
Yeah.
Paul. He's just like,
You have to,
just
focus on
just
one
let me
problem
process.
at
Just
a
let me
time.
process. Yeah.
So yeah,
that
and Charles
happens.
leaves him there. Charles doesn't force the issue. He leaves him there. And then it's just kind of maintaining for a few days until Charles notices that Edwards has,
Well, he finds
has
out Edward's there. Yeah.
yeah.
And then he goes and there's a young girl there. And
That
this
is
young
actually
girl,
Leslie Landon.
yes. Her name in IMDb is Leslie. The character's
Yes.
name is Leslie. She does go on to be like a actual character later on, but for this particular scene, she's Leslie. And if you've read any of the biographies or autobiographies about Little House, one of the things they talk about is the fact that Michael Landon was a real stickler about professionalism. He, he would do certain scenes multiple takes, but for himself, he was a consummate actor, even though he was drunk out of his gourd half the time. But he was a functioning alcoholic. Sorry if that spoils that for anybody. But they said in the IMDb notes the fact that he had to do several takes of this because when he was sitting there looking at his daughter as she was telling him and she was potentially dying, it was too emotional for him. And he didn't know this. He didn't know this townsperson the way.
Yeah, we knew Leslie. I mean, he calls her Leslie. And he does say that he went and saw her parents and that her mom wanted to give me a bunch of cornbread.
Yeah. And then he immediately goes over and checks. Then she falls asleep. She didn't die.
Yeah.
She falls asleep.
No, she just falls asleep.
And then he walks over to Edwards and he says something about the corn.
Rogers.
He's like, it's the corn.
So they go over to Peterson's.
And they go up
he's
in the office.
Yeah, he's in the office. So this has to be the Peterson.
He sells it for half the price. So he knows something's wrong with it. Yet he's eating his own cornbread, knowing there's something wrong with it.
Not necessarily, because he's handling those bags.
Okay.
So
But when he gets the keys, when they get the keys and they open that shed, in the first scene, we saw one rat.
What? Now it's just swarming.
Story proportions of like 50 rats in there.
Yeah.
And see all the rats, and you would think the rats would try to run out because how did they get in there? Again, brand new building. Why are there none of? And the bags are bright white,
but they're also open. Several of them are like open and spilling corn, and I'm like, well, why
know that this is what it was?
Yeah,
chose to sell it. But anyway, he ends up being basically almost dead, and they run in and they
torch the entire
shed.
But the thing is, it's very convenient that it's this outside shed. It's literally not a part of the actual, set building.
Right.
They obviously built this for this episode so they could burn it. But none of the rats escape there and go to any of the wheat or any of the seed or anything else that's around them. They're all just in this cornmeal. So
it was very clean.
Yes, once we burn this building, everyone will get better, which is what happens.
Yeah. So
except for those people that die.
And then suddenly and then they're all better. They save the hell out of, they sulfurize the church.
Yes.
It's like, it's gonna smell like fire and brimstone for a while there, preacher. Which, let's say Reverend Alden, not always the nicest preacher, so maybe he'll work with that. He'll use it.
He'll use it. You're gonna smell for eternity.
Yeah, if you don't like this smell, just wait till you get to hell, my friends. Yeah. But so it all gets better, and then Charles invites Edwards to home, and he's like, it seems like it should be a family moment. He's like, haven't you figured out that you're family yet?
Your
And then they come
family.
home and everybody clings to Charles. And then Caroline sticks her hand out far, far away and holds Edward's hand. She doesn't pull him in. She leaves her hand out there, strong man. And here's the thing, they boiled his clothes, so it can't be for the normal reasons of him being a
No,
dirty
stinky.
single guy. But then they turn around because here comes Carrie. Oh yeah, we forgot about her, which I'm not convinced that's Carrie because it was a much blonder headed kid.
I
But
don't think that was. I think that was probably another one of Landon's kids or just some crew kid that
yeah,
they
some
had
stunt
in a
double
truck.
kid. And then
They
they
obviously
come
didn't
up
have
and they
Leslie.
turn to grab her because it's such a far off shot. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that wasn't Carrie. She must have not been able to be there for some reason. But anyway, and then the girls go and hug Edwards
Yeah.
while we're doing that. But it was a little bit,
It was awkward. It
it
was
was
awkward.
awkward. It was very awkward. Okay.
But this is a weird episode because it does seem like this man is deliberately selling stuff he kind of sort of knows might be tainted.
Because how else would he price it so cheap?
Yeah. And it's separate from all of his other stuff. So it's very
And he sells it to the
suspicious.
poor people. Yeah. But he
Yeah.
doesn't get any kind of villainy redemption arc where he's
No.
the one that comes. For all
Or
intents and
any
purposes, we never see him again. You don't see Eric coming and killing him or trying to kill him with Paw trying to talk him down. None of that. Like that just all goes away. We're just like, we're burning everything you got, dude. So leave town.
and that
But
solves the entire problem.
yeah, I'm gonna say that this guy died. Peterson died, but
I'm assuming so. I'm assuming, yeah.
because he
I'm
was so
assuming,
close to death when they found him. But
yeah.
so Robert Folk was the guy who played Peterson. He this was not his last TV episode. His last IMDb credit was actually just a couple years later, though, in Pete's Dragon. So he was towards the end of it, but he was in both Bonanza and Gunsmoke for multiple episodes. Bill Quinn was the one who played Carl Harper. He was the old guy on the cart. He was in 7 episodes of Bonanza. He was in Highway to Heaven, so he does go on to be with him later. And then he was in 88 episodes of Archie Bunker's Place. I didn't know that
Oh, wow.
that Archie Bunker's Place was that
had that many episodes.
And he doesn't have credits for like All in the Family. He was a character that was introduced there, but he did, a lot of these one-offs. Like I try to look through and see if there's like they ever landed a series or something like that. And a lot of them were one-offs, but this guy actually did have a very successful career after. Ivy Bethune, who played Alice Harper, she actually goes on to be in Father Murphy, which was a spinoff as a totally different character. And she had a very plum role. And she also was in General Hospital, like the little boy was in the General Hospital, different times. But so now we're starting to see one of the things that you start to notice about some of these one-off actors is they're kind of like in modern times that would be the CSI or the NCIS or Law and Order, where they live in New York, so they all get a credit for that somewhere along the way. But she was in General Hospital for a long time. She was in further. I have a note here that Bill Quinn was McCory's father, but I don't remember what that means. So you talk for a second.
Okay. So yeah, this is the first time that the town folk are poisoned by food. This will happen again. You'll find that the show will tend to retread a lot of these earlier plot lines.
Uh, yeah, so I'm sorry. He was a Star Trek reference. He was in Star Trek
Oh,
5, The Final Frontier, as McCoy's father. I'm looking.
that's where I recognized him.
He was
That's where I
McCoy's father
recognized
in
him.
Star Trek
Yep.
5. So,
Yeah.
okay. But yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it's kind of a weird episode. This did spark an interest in baking with me. Two things sparked an interest in baking with me. One is a reference in The Hobbit to seed cake, which I'd never heard of before. So I wanted to make that. And here, Pa asked for salt rise bread, which
Yes.
I had no idea what it was. It's not, you actually don't rise it with salt. It's like sourdough. It's another starter bread.
And
Um,
this is where I had my duh moment that I alluded to before, because the whole time he's eating the bread, I kept waiting for Caroline to say, yes, I made it with corn this time, or something like that. I just kept waiting because, again, this is from 1975, which was a long time ago. We're talking 50 years ago. I
yes.
don't remember all of these episodes by heart. And so I just kept having that moment. And then I was like, no, Joey, they're wheat farmers. They're only going to use wheat flour.
Wait,
So
yeah.
they're not in danger. So that was a little bit of my dumb moment.
There's something funny about that scene where he's eating the bread and they're talking because the girls go back inside and
Yeah.
close the door. And you see Melissa Sue Anderson sit down at the table. And then she just sits there and doesn't
Doesn't do.
move the entire scene. You can see her in the window. And I'm like, did they put a dummy there?
That's funny.
But
Like they
I
didn't
kept
give
my
her like schoolwork to do or anything like that.
or even just like eating or anything. She's just sitting there. And I'm like, they might have just slipped a dummy into the chair.
So there was a thing about that scene that I noticed too, is that when he does ride off, because now he's alone with her, he could have said, I love you, Caroline. He could have said
Yeah.
anything. He's like, all right, I'll see you in a day or the day after tomorrow. And he just
He
rides
does
off.
say that she looks beautiful.
Yes.
It's a
Well, he
kind of
does.
cute
And they do
exchange.
that little
Yeah.
giggly thing. And then he's
Yeah.
like, all right, I'll see you in a day and a half.
Okay, bye.
Bye. I was like, all right. The other thing I thought you were going to say about the baking, which is early on, we're going to go back to Sylvie. We're going
Oh,
to the
makeshift,
baker's the makeshift baker thing, because it
the
kind of
oven.
shows it kind of shows the makeshift oven that she had to make because she was on the poorer side.
Right.
But
They don't
they
have a
took an
stove.
old flaxseed oil metal pan, put a handle on it, wooden handle. I wonder if Pa made that for her because he's the only person in town that can make anything out of wood, as we know. And then they used that as a reflector so that she could put the pan on the inside to direct the heat directly in there. So if you didn't have the side oven built into your fireplace, this was one way that you could do it if you didn't have like a pan to do a bread in a pan, like
Yeah.
in a kettle or something like that.
Yeah.
So I did think that was cute, cool, and it was definitely, I like going back
Time
and watching
appropriate.
these and seeing some of the little historical things they stick in. Like I did go and look up Pinochle in the previous episode to see when that game started coming around and stuff like that. So I do think that was something that kind of interested me in baking too, because I'd be like, man, I wonder if we could do that. So we are here in Western North Carolina for y'all. We are not,
Mhm.
we're on the outskirts of Western North Carolina. We're on the edge. We're here in
Yeah.
Charlotte, North Carolina. So we definitely have had lots of friends and family that have been dealing with Hurricane Helene. And, we just had announced last week that potable water is back in Asheville and it's now drinkable.
Yeah.
However,
That was
that
weeks
does
after.
not mean that you can drink right out of your faucet. You have to pay to flush it. Not all the businesses can
Yeah.
afford to do that. But definitely people have had to be very creative about their cooking. Not us. Obviously, we have power here.
Mhm.
Um, but our friends have. And so I definitely pay attention to all of these little um cooking vignette things that we see. So the other thing I noticed from a cooking aspect is that once Pa had been exposed to typhus, we saw them eating turkey and chickens.
Yes.
They because they weren't going out shooting, they were
They weren't
killing
going on hunting.
they
They
were
were
killing their own
they were using their
livestock.
own animals. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is a pretty good episode. It shows kind of like the some of the horrors of frontier life, because if you don't know what's causing the disease, it can spread very, very quickly.
Right.
Uh,
And it made
uh,
Doc Baker have to focus. He couldn't be focused on his broken heart. He had to be
yeah,
focused on this. If this
on
was
this.
done in that order, we go back to viewing Doc Baker from focus.
But it also puts that episode in perspective, because here he's working super long hours and running himself ragged, and he's not like dropping.
Yeah.
So it's not like Hiram Baker was frail.
No. But we did learn a little bit more about the ice house and stuff like that. At one point, we were down to one block of ice, and then suddenly there was a couple more.
Yeah.
So obviously, they got some refills. It gives a little bit of a redemption to Reverend Alden. This is not his redemption arc, but it's the start
Yeah.
of Reverend Alden being part of the community, not just coming in and criticizing the community, which
Yeah.
his speeches and sermons tend to do. This is him actually caring enough about the community. We find out that he's not just coming in from Mankato and leaving like he was
staying at a
originally.
farmhouse.
He was staying at a farmhouse, and then he came in and exposed himself and said, "Now you got to use me." And he
Yeah.
was white haired, not
Yeah.
Hiram, white haired.
So
The three of them were working around the clock together and banding together. So I do. I think it was a stronger episode. I think it was a little more serious of an episode, although we still have some funny moments with the crying about the rabbits and all that kind of stuff.
so I used bingo card 20, still no bingo.
But lots of tick marks. Tell us what you ticked off.
I ticked off wild animal attack. I'm counting the rats.
Yes.
Nightcaps, because you had that scene with Laura counting her teeth, because she loses a tooth in this episode, and she's
Yes.
trying to see how much money she's going to get.
If she
Someone's
lost all of her
fever break.
teeth, it would be 25 cents.
Yeah.
But then she wouldn't have any teeth to chew the candy that was causing her to lose all her teeth. So,
Yep. Someone's fever breaks. Mom and Pa share a knowing look.
yeah.
Oh, Charles.
Yeah.
Old Man Tucker, because they play that refrain when he's brought in. Someone gets hurt. Lots of people get hurt. There's actually a body count in this one. Free space. Pa cries. Frozen Mary, because she just sat at that table.
I totally missed that. Now I'm going to have to go back and rewind part of that episode.
It's just like, what does she do? Yes, and then Ma cries. So
yeah, you would think Doc Baker as a veterinarian would see the rat bites or fleas better, but
or something. Yeah, you would think. I would actually think that would be their immediate thought. Check your food stores for vermin. So he would have been going through their food stores, and that bag of cornmeal has fleas popping on it. So I'm like, how could he have not seen that? He spent so much time at Eric and Sylvie's. So this is kind of like Pa saves the day type thing. Pa has to be the one to figure out it's the cornmeal.
yeah.
So, but that's Little House on the Prairie, because Pa Ingalls is the best dude on the prairie, and he's got to solve most of the problems.
Yeah, so let's just be clear. This is not about Laura Ingalls Wilder.
No, this is about Michael Landon.
Season. This is not the season. No. Later on, it will become more. But honestly, you can't expect children to carry. And they're younger here. You can, but
actually physically, I don't know if you can, because it's so much work for an hour-long show. I don't think the kids could be the focal point for those first couple of seasons, simply because they wouldn't have them on set long enough to make them the focal point.
Exactly. So,
this isn't like a half-hour sitcom. But even
if you're producing, writing, directing this, and you want to act in it too, more power to you.
Yeah.
So, and again, functioning alcoholic through all of this. So
through all of this, that is kind of amazing. But also, I'm not surprised that he died in his 50s.
No. Well, from cancer, but definitely as a result of some of the other stuff. So Next episode is going to be Circus Man. That's episode
Yeah.
19. This is 19 based on IMDb. We talk about this. Peacock has it differently. Also, sometimes some other stations have switched the Doctor's Lady and Circus Man in the order that they play them in. And it could
They
have
do that
been
a lot.
based on when it was taped, not when it was aired. So,
Yeah.
here we go.
So Victor French directs the next episode, and we do have a special guest star.
We'll talk that then, though.
Yeah.
In the
So-
meantime, if you have any questions for us, you can email
Contact
us.
us at twowokebonnets@gmail.com.
Yep. Or you
And,
can make comments on the YouTube. You can make
Yeah.
comments on the Facebook. We know we've been a little bit off schedule. We do address that in the previous podcast episode, but for those of you who have
Life
skipped
happens.
ahead, life happens. I'm recovering from surgery. I'm fine. But we'll be back on schedule. So be looking for a new episode every Friday. See you soon.
Until then, see you then.
Thanks for listening to Two Woke Bonnets. To find out more and to download your bingo card, visit twowokebonnets.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe wherever fine video and audio podcasts are played.